Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading is of Chapter 16, followed by a reflection on the same. Chapter 16. At the men's end of the table, the talk grew more and more animated. The colonel told them that the declaration of war had already appeared in Petersburg, and that a copy, which he had himself seen, had that day been forwarded by courier to the commander-in-chief. "And why the deuce are we going to fight Bonaparte?" remarked Shinshin. "He has stopped Austria's cackle, and I fear it will be our turn next." The colonel was a stout, tall, plethoric German, evidently devoted to the service and patriotically Russian. He resented Shinshin's remark. "It is for the reason, my good sir," said he, speaking with a German accent, which I am going to butcher, "for the reason that the Emperor knows that. He declares in the manifesto that he cannot see with indifference the danger threatening Russia, and that the safety and dignity of the Emperor as well as the sanctity of its alliances." He spoke this last word with particular emphasis, as if in it lay the gist of the matter. Then, with the unerring official memory that characterized him, he repeated from the opening words of the manifesto. "In the wish which constitutes the Emperor's sole and absolute aim, to establish peace in Europe on firm foundations, has now decided him to dispatch part of the army abroad and to create a new condition for the attainment of that purpose. That, my dear sir, is why," he concluded, drinking a tumbler of wine with dignity and looking to the Count for approval. "Connaissez-vous la proverbe, Jerome do not roam, but turn spindles at home?" said Shinshin, puckering his brows and smiling. "Cela nous convient à merveille." Suvorov now, he knew what he was about. Yet they beat him à plat couture, and were we to find Suvorovs now? "Je vous demande un peu," said he, continually changing from French to Russian. "We must fight to the last drop of our blood," said the colonel, thumping the table, "and we must die for the Emperor, and then all will be well, and we must discuss it as little as possible." He dwelt particularly on the word possible, as possible, he ended, again turning to the Count. "That is how we old hussars look at it, and there's an end of it. And how do you, a young man and a young hussar, how do you judge of it?" he added, addressing Nicholas, who, when he heard that the war was being discussed, had turned from his partner with eyes and ears intent on the colonel. "I am quite of your opinion," replied Nicholas, flaming up, turning his plate around and moving his wineglass about with as much decision and desperation as though he were at that moment facing some great danger. "I am convinced that we Russians must die or conquer," he concluded, conscious, as were others, after the words were uttered, that his remarks were too enthusiastic and emphatic for the occasion, and were therefore awkward. "What you said just now was splendid," said his partner Julie. Sonia trembled all over, and blushed to her ears, and behind them, and down to her neck and shoulders, while Nicholas was speaking. Pierre listened to the colonel's speech and nodded approvingly. "That's fine," said he. "The young man's a real hussar," shouted the colonel, again thumping the table. "What are you making such a noise about over there?" Maria Dmitrievna's deep voice suddenly inquired from the other end of the table. "What are you thumping the table for?" she demanded of the hussar. "And why are you exciting yourself? Do you think the French are here?" "I am speaking the truth," replied the hussar with a smile. "It's all about the war," the Count shouted down the table. "You know my son's going, Maria Dmitrievna. My son is going. I have 4 sons in the army, but still I don't fret. It is all in God's hands. You may die in your bed, or God may spare you in battle, replied Maria Dmitrievna's deep voice, which easily carried the whole length of the table. That's true. Once more, the conversations concentrated, the ladies at the one end and the men's at the other. You won't ask, Natasha's little brother was saying. I know you won't ask. I will, replied Natasha. Her face suddenly flushed with reckless and joyous resolution. She half rose, by a glance inviting Pierre, who sat opposite, to listen to what was coming, and turning to her mother, Mamma, rang out the clear contralto notes of her childish voice, audible the whole length of the table. What is it? Asked the Countess, startled. But seeing by her daughter's face that it was only mischief, she shook a finger at her sternly, with a threatening and forbidding movement of her head. The conversation was hushed. Mamma, what sweets are we going to have? And Natasha's voice sounded still more firm and resolute. The Countess tried to frown, but could not. Maria Dmitrievna shook her fat finger. Cossack! She said threateningly. Most of the guests, uncertain how to regard this sally, looked at the elders. You had better take care, said the Countess. Mamma, what sweets are we going to have? Natasha again cried boldly, with saucy gaiety, confident that her prank would be taken in good part. Sonia and fat little Petya doubled up with laughter. You see, I have asked, whispered Natasha to her little brother, and to Pierre, glancing at him again. Ice pudding, but you won't get any, said Maria Dmitrievna. Natasha saw there was nothing to be afraid of, and so she braved even Maria Dmitrievna. Maria Dmitrievna, what kind of ice pudding? I don't like ice cream. Carrot ices. No, what kind, Maria Dmitrievna, what kind? She almost screamed. I want to know. Maria Dmitrievna and the Countess burst out laughing, and all the guests joined in. Everyone laughed, not at Maria Dmitrievna's answer, but at the incredible boldness and smartness of this little girl who had dared to treat Maria Dmitrievna in this fashion. Natasha only desisted when she had been told that there would be pineapple ice. Before the ices, champagne was served round. The band again struck up, the Count and Countess kissed, and the guests, leaving their seats, went up to congratulate the Countess, and reached across the table to clink glasses with the Count, with the children, and with one another. Again the footmen rushed about, chairs scraped, and in the same order in which they had entered, but with redder faces now, the guests returned to the drawing room and to the Count's study. That concludes my reading of chapter 16 of War and Peace. I will now follow with my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 16. You may die in your bed. We are now at the Rostovs' dinner table. The men's side of the table vigorously discusses the declaration of war. The colonel, a German, demands fealty to the Russian emperor and a swift victory against the French. Shinshin feels differently, asking why Russians should leave Russia to fight someone else's war. Because of alliances, the colonel animatedly responds, echoing conversations about international relation stories you might hear at cocktail parties today. Nicholas, as a new Hussar who will soon experience the war himself, is asked how he feels. He's firmly in the colonel's camp. Of course, he's embarrassed by this response, not so much because of its content, but rather because of its emotional delivery, which even he identifies as too charged for the social setting. We've talked about Nicholas's emotional problems before. This isn't the last we'll see of them. Before moving on, I'd just like to note that one of the reasons to read War and Peace is that it showcases grand panoramic range and expertly observed microscopic detail. We see that in today's chapter. The topic of the men's conversation is expansive: war, political obligations, the sweep of history. And yet, Tolstoy manages to integrate the small detail of Sonia's blushing at her rival, Julie Karagina, as she compliments Nicholas on his speech. Getting back to the story now, the impassioned excitement from the men's side of the table draws the attention of Maria Dmitrievna. She asks why it is the men are so agitated. Count Rostov explains that they're talking about the war, and that his son is to take part in the war effort. Maria Dmitrievna, in response that will be the subject of our meditation today, tells him that is still no reason to behave so heatedly at a dinner party. Natasha, always the lively one, closes out the chapter with a childish demand to know the dessert that shall be served. This outburst supports Willie Collins' demand for the reform of children, given that nature's only idea seems to be to make them machines for the production of incessant noise. I have 4 sons in the army, but still I don't fret. It is all in God's hands. You may die in your bed, or God may spare you in battle. These are the words of Maria Dmitrievna as she replies to all the fuss coming from the men's side of the table in today's reading. Some may interpret them as unforgivably fatalist, but to me they contain the seeds to a life philosophy that, if planted and attended to, will yield the enduring fruit of mental tranquility. As we read along, it will be worth asking ourselves if the characters of the novel heed this meditation. More often than not, the characters who do will find themselves at peace, whereas the ones who do not will be agitated, at war with themselves. Daily meditation. Of things, some are in our power, and others are not. In our power are opinion, movement towards a thing, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own acts. Not in our power are the body, property, reputation, offices, and in a word, whatever are not our own acts. Epictetus and Caridian. We must make the best use that we can of the things which are in our power, and use the rest according to their nature. What is their nature, then? As God may please. Epictetus, The Discourses. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 16 of War and Peace. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are below. Tomorrow, we will be reading chapter 17 of War and Peace and reflecting on the same. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and of others.